The story of the fall of Atlantis. Greetings, Masters. I am Archangel Metatron, Lord of Light. I greet you all in a vector of unconditional love. Atlantis is indeed the missing link of Pangaea, located in mid-Atlantic. We will share with you its story in detail below. But be aware, Masters, not all of the great temple crystals of Atlantis were lost. Indeed, some of you were involved in their rescue. The first temple crystal saved was the blue crystal of knowledge. It is below the earth, below the crown center of the vortex, termed Tilamina Ridge, in a sacred chasm, built long ago. The blue crystal of knowledge stands erect, 48 feet in height and 12 feet in diameter. It pulses and exudes a rainbow of silver, turquoise and cobalt blue as it activates in sacred contract. It holds the multidimensional wisdom and knowledge of the ages. The second one saved was the emerald crystal. It is now beneath Mount Muga, the heart center of the crystal vortex of Arkansas. It is approximately 20 meters in height and 5 meters in breadth. The third crystal placed in the ark was that of the platinum. The platinum crystal beneath the magnetic mount near the area of Eureka Springs awakens in 2011 on the November 11, 2011. The platinum crystal is truly clear in color, but it projects a shimmering field of platinum silver consisting of subatomic particulate termed bioplasma. The bioplasma is a conscious field, self-aware. The bioplasmic field emitted by the platinum crystal harmonizes the gateway spectrum of physical matter and antimatter. The platinum crystal is enormous, over 100 meters in height and far deeper below the surface than the others. Its reach is cosmic, and its energy by 2012 will encircle and span the planet, networked with the other crystals and disseminated through the Christo-Sun disk. Revisiting Atlantis, the true legend of the fall, dear ones, these crystals were saved from destruction, and now you are offered the memory of why. For such magnificent crystal beings offer all of you so much. The expansion, the sacred completion applies to all. It is time to remember who you were, in order to become all you are in this awakening time. This return to the quantum crystalline field. Atlantis was a golden time, a magnificent epic, that was betrayed by its unseemly end. And so we tell you the true history of that demise. You see, Atlantis existed for over 200,000 years. The vast majority of the Atlantean times were epochs of light. Only the final phase, the period from 17,500 BC to 10,500 BC was in your terms, a dark era, but one rich in lessons. The Golden Age, we tell you in fact that the golden period of Atlantis was the highest level of light consciousness ever achieved on the earth plane in any advanced civilization, higher than Lemuria, higher than Mu, higher than Rama, higher than Ignatius. It has become somewhat fashionable to consider Lemuria as being the utopian civilization, and though they did achieve a relatively short-lived phase of high consciousness, most in the era were not truly in physical bodies, rather in divik-like etheric states, and did not face the difficulties required of the physical earth stage. Indeed, Lemuria never achieved the highly advanced level that existed in that golden phase of Atlantis from 40,000 BC to 18,000 BC. A time when gods walked with men, and all knew joyful expression. It was the hallowed time when many of you walked as star children, and later chose biology and the lesson cycles of reincarnation on the blue planet called Earth. So when you consider Atlantis, do not only remember its sad demise. It was but a short phase of the magnificent antediluvian world, yet it must not be forgotten, so very much is to be gained by understanding the final phase, and dear ones, it is time to remember. The Atlantean hologram, so we speak of once mighty Atlantis. And we speak to all of you, for Atlantis is a great hologramic lesson, and ones whose time has returned, for the memory of Atlantis is not just a healing. Indeed, for some it is a requisite healing, a necessary cleansing, but for others it is also a benevolent empowerment. It recalls a time when you walked in wisdom and harmony. Regardless of your myriad roles in Atlantis, and dear ones, 70% of all on planet Earth at this time experienced physicality there. Atlantis now calls to you. And the call is not just for those of you of the Law of One, It is equally called to the Aryans, to the sons of Belial. Indeed, many of you experienced lifetimes in both ideologies. Does that surprise you? The deluge of 17,500 BC, downward spiral of the final phase, the time is after the second deluge, when the utopian golden age subsided and Atlantis split into 5 islands. The 3 major islands were known as Poseida, Aryan and Og. The 2 smaller islands were under the rule of the Aryan race, and were known as Atlia and Air. And so in the days after the second breakup of Atlantis, the benevolent government ruled by a kingdom passed into the phase of a confederation, state governments, in your present terms, that ruled each of the islands. An aristocracy of sorts evolved that consisted of 2 opposing ideologies. The 2 major components of these were the Atla-Ra scientist priesthood of the Law of One, based predominantly on the Isle of Poseida, and the Aryan race of the sons of Belial based on the Isle of Aryan. The island of Aryan was the most populated and exerted influence and political control over Og, Atlia and Air. The Isle of Poseida was the planet's most potent vortex portal complex at the time of Atlantis. The Poseida grouping and isle housed the Temple of Healing, the Temple of Sound, the Temple of One, the Temple of Regeneration and the Temple of Knowledge. Poseida housed most of the major centers for higher learning. These were placed on Poseida because of its advantageous location within the geodesic grids and its proximity to beneficial electromagnetic energies that spiraled upward from the Earth's core. An incredibly potent healing spring flowed on Poseida, near the Temple of Healing, and its lore spawned the myths of the Fountain of Youth passed down by the indigenous peoples of Florida. It flows yet into the oceans near Bimini. The tall ones, the golden race of Atlantis, of blood and seed, were centered in Poseida, these ones averaging 10 to 12 feet in stature. These were a gentle race of giants, involved in the cultural, artistic and educational pursuits in the heart of Atlantis. Poseida was also the headquarters and nucleus of the crystalline power grid and interdimensional tunnel system. The most advanced, complex and beautiful of the crystals were here. They were of Arcturian and Syrian Palladian construct, a living amalgam of many crystalline forms imbued with an alloy of platinum and gold. The crystals were housed in magnificent temples, some built of marble, others of crystalline sheets of beryl, corundum and diamond. The city of Poseida was the capital city of the island, and was called the Emerald City. Its bioplasmic field was projected into a shimmering glowing aurora of emerald green, visible for miles. The Atlanteans had perfected, with Arcturian technology, the ability to grow crystals of every structure and essence in an accelerated growth within the underground crystal beds of Arkansas, Tibet and Brazil, all being Atlantean colonies, accessed through the interdimensional tunnel system. The poser fields and the crystal satellite, throughout Atlantis, power grid crystals, called posers, were triangulated and connected through an alloyed gold-copper rod under a spherical dome that could be angled to receive specific stellar, solar and gravitational energy waves. This was the system used to power homes, offices, media, and theaters, manufacturing concerns, medical centers, schools and businesses. The poser system was received in each structure by receiving crystal units of various sizes. The poser system was also able to receive specialized refracted light and feed it into the Lange system for use in the interdimensional tunnel system and feed crystalline light into conductive earth currents to raise the frequency into a semi-aware electromagnetic plasmic field of benevolent energy capable of retaining spiritual frequencies. A great crystalline satellite, referred to as the second moon of Atlantis, floated above in the skies and received, amplified and reflected refined energy back to the crystals for various beneficial purposes. It served both the posers and the master crystals used in the temples. Specialized energy fields were projected into agricultural and crystal growing areas to amplify and accelerate growth, as well as into universities, hospitals, schools, offices, factories and workplaces to create a sense of well-being and invigoration for the workers and students. We will speak more of this second moon later in this essay. Now, the temples were astonishing works of sacred geometry and stunning architecture. Many of the great temples were covered in a dome of projected crystalline amplified light somewhat like a glowing force field. Others were set within pyramids degreed at very specific angles. The energy fields projected above both the spherical domes and the pyramids were of various colors and glowed in day and night like the aurora. These were varied according to the purpose of the temple complex, and the colors were obviously more clearly visible at night. Some temples projected domes and fields of vibratory light and resonant sound frequencies that amplified the senses and chakras, others amplified the receptive learning ability of the mind, and others enabled multidimensional consciousness, communication and transport. The pyramidal form was used primarily for multidimensional receival and transmission. The dome spheres were used to amplify the fields received for specific purpose. Most of the major populous areas and cities during the Golden Age of Atlantis had crystalline power domes of energy plasmic fields above them. When observed from a distance, these energy plasma fields would appear as if they were a tangible glass, but they were not solid, rather subatomic plasma and composed of what is termed bioplasma. These were regulated by the amazing magnanimous glowing platinum crystal of bioplasmic interface. The crystal itself was transparent but the field it projected was a luminescent platinum in hue. Posita, each of the master crystals, and there were 12, were networked with a series of satellites. After the second deluge, only the capital city of Posita had a full crystalline energy dome, and it was an incredible emerald green color. Prior to the deluge of 17,500 BC, most major cities, including Merivia, the capital of the island of Arion, had such power domes over the perimeter. The one in Arion was a soft ruby red. In the Golden Age of Atlantis, the pyramids were 3- and 4-sided, depending on their utility, and generally made of marble, granite and complex crystals. The 3-sided pyramids were used as antennas to draw and amplify energies and fed them into the poser grid to power homes, factories and create energy fields for various utilities. The crystalline satellite was used to reflect the angled stellar energy waves into these triangulated grids. There were over 100 of these triangulated pyramidal grid complexes. They were set up in concentric triangulation patterns all over the planet. They established a hemispheric grid network of crystalline and electromagnetic energy dividing the areas of Atlantis, America, Africa, Mediterranean Europe and South America into different demographic centers for powering population centers, and to modulate weather patterns and tides. The areas of Mongolia and Tibet were also part of this complex, connected by interdimensional ley tunnels. But the largest groupings of these were in the homelands of Atlantis. The 4-sided pyramids were essentially temple complexes set as full octahedrons and used for healing, learning, regeneration and spiritual purposes. These were not triangulated, and generally set on hilltops or along the coastlines to receive both telluric and celestial energies. The lands below the center plane were excavated to allow for the downward pyramid of the octahedron design construct, thus connecting energetically to both above and below. The law of one contingency of Posita were devoutly spiritual people and sought equality among the people and a unification of oneness. Their society was feminine matriarchal in the sense of nurturing. They were not seekers of power, rather of harmony. They were a tall race, their skin appeared toned as a golden hue, but was very translucent. It was in fact their auric projection that glowed golden. Their auric fields were visible to all. Thus the stages of spiritual mastery were immediately discernible by the colors and size of the auric Marikana. The highest among the Atla-Ra exuded Merkara, the energy of the Avatar. They were able to operate in complete consciousness of multidimensionality, to manifest and regenerate at will. As such they cannot be truly compared to present humans. Their bodies were luminous and the degree of physical manifestation was far less dense than humans in the present age. In Merkana and Merkara format, the masters of the Atla-Ra did not truly consider themselves of the earth. The Merkara field of the Avatar, even in physical manifestation in 3D, was primarily in earth via 12D. They required very little food consumption as their bodies were bioplasmic in nature, thus the longevity, for they were above linear space and duality time. In their wisdom and nature, they were quite detached from the 3D density aspect of the Earth. They existed above the polarity, yet were in a form of light physicality. That detachment above polarity is in part the reason they did not karmically oppose the Aryan decline into physical density, as the Aryan sons of Belial became engrossed in what may be termed military corporate power lust. Although much technology and quality of life had been lost in the prior two breakups of Atlantis, the first in 58,000 BC, the second being in 17,500 BC, technology still remained at an advanced level. Yet the harmony experienced in the Golden Age of Atlantis spiraled downward after the breakup into islands in 17,500 BC as the islands grew into separately governed entities, which held to very differing ideologies in the initially chaotic and difficult period of reconstruction immediately after the breakup. Poseidon remained within the contingency of the spiritual law of one, while the people of Aryan became gradually engrossed in power and materialism. Poseida and the Atla-Ra, a highly disciplined and evolved sect of scientist priests, held the technical wisdom and expertise of managing the crystal power grids. The vast majority of Atla-Ra were of the tall golden race, but there were also members from the bronze, white, lemurian brown and cetacean races. At that time there were still avatar-level cetacean dolphin beings that walked on two legs. These highly benevolent dolphins verbally communicated and breathed air in a similar fashion to humankind. The avatar cetacean were golden in auric projection, and are the source of those termed the golden dolphin. The golden dolphin were harbingers of the aspect termed matriarchal, an energy that you term feminine divine, although they were primarily non-gendered in the physical sexual sense of the present paradigm. The sect of scientist priests were referred to as the Atla-Ra. The Atla-Ra maintained the highest standards of consciousness and were able to continue vibrating at very high frequencies of consciousness, at and above the level of 12th-dimensional light and energy, remaining very pure and resonant with the true oneness concept of the Creator, God. They sustained higher dimensional telepathic contacts with the advanced space brethren from the Pleiades, Arcturus, Andromeda and Sirius. The Atla-Ra priests were highly disciplined, revered and traditionally separate, above and exempt from governmental controls, and thus kept the knowledge and senior management of crystal technology largely in the wise and benevolent hands of the sect, although there were some technicians and crystal engineers from the Poseidon populace involved who were not in the Atla-Ra sect. The scientist priests of Atla-Ra were both male and female and were capable of great lifespans, both through the regeneration of mind power and through the technology of same and the temple of rejuvenation. Many lived lifetimes in the same biology for 6,000 years, some to 12,000 years. Thus was the technology preserved through this holy sect. Many brilliant souls were among these. The entities you know as Galileo, Isaac Newton, Einstein, Tesla, Edison, Marcel Vogel, and Da Vinci were among the Atla-Ra. Tiburon and Oneron were part of this group of scientist priests, who lived very long lifetimes. Many of you, especially your artists, have great recall of the capital city of Atlantis of Poseida located on the island of Poseida. It was termed the Emerald City because of the glowing green light dome projected over it. Some of your artists in fact have made renditions of the city that are quite accurate. It was an exquisite marvel of architecture, culture and engineering, by far the most beautiful metropolis that has ever existed on your planet. It was breathtaking. The city, named Poseida as was the state, was composed of a series of concentric walls and encircled by flowing sea-green canals. It was full of beautifully constructed temples, universities, theaters and museums. At the very center was a hill, and on top of the hill the majestic and stunning temple of Poseidon, which was visible from everywhere in the Holy Emerald City. Inside the temple was a massive gold statue of the god of the sea, Poseidon, showing him driving 6 winged horses made of extraterrestrial platinum. The statue was embellished with precious gemstones of every color and type. The temple was octagonal, and along each of the 8 walls were built convex enclosures with platforms for amazing crystals that stood 12 feet high and glowed like transparent diamonds. Poseida had been the least damaged of the major Atlantean cities after the breakup of the original single continent into islands in 17,500 BC, and was still of a very high frequency and quality of life. The Isle of Arion and the industrial complex. The Isle of Arion was the largest of the Atlantean islands and the most populated. Arion was the commercial center and yielded the most influence from the economic, agricultural and military perspective. After the Second Deluge, Arion was significantly damaged and the infrastructure required a chaotic stage of rebuilding. In the process, the state became controlled by an elitist, affluent white race, who gained control of the economy, military powers and island state government, even though the majority of the populace were themselves of the bronze or red race. From Arion grew a corrupt power-minded aristocracy who sought to block the Law of One and utilize Atlantis' technology for control of the world, this through the utilization of crystalline energy for weaponry, and use of genetic science for development and retention of an inferior race to serve as workers and soldiers. The genetic engineering was based in Maravia, on Arion. It had originally been used for benevolent purposes, for seeking improved physical vehicles for those that had incarnated into physical bodies that mutated into half-man half-beast abominations. The genetic work had been processed and developed on Arion and was used to remove appendages, claws, feathers and reptilian skins and scales. This was done in the Temple of Purification, somewhat of a specialized medical center. Again, we emphasize that during the previous golden age of Atlantis, its utility had been quite benevolent. Tremendous genetic advances were made and a great understanding of cloning and adjusting physical limitations for betterment came in responsible, ethical utility. In the chaos of the Reconstruction period, genetic engineering came under the control of the Belial group, and then denigrated into corrupt uses of greed and power. The genetic engineering began being used for dark ends, in creating a race of worker slaves and hybrid man-animals. Just as in Nazi Germany it was conveyed to the masses as development of a pure race. In fact, many of the genetic scientists were initially kept unaware of what their research and development work was being used for until it was essentially too late for them to stop it. Some of you carry great guilt to this day as a result of this work. The Law of One and the Sons of Belial, this use of genetically engineered servant classes led to the great rift between the Atla-Ra priesthood-led race of Poseida following the Law of One and the Aryan race known as the Sons of Belial, the latter of which became so engrossed and hardened in the materialistic ambitions of the industrial machine that they lost sight of the spiritual ethics that had prevailed over the continent of Atlantis in the previous golden era. Literally hundreds of thousands of hybrid mutations were created to work the fields and monstrosities were created with controlled minds to robotically do the bidding of their masters. The agro-industrial society of Arion became quite dependent on them. Souls became trapped in cloned bodies termed things and others with genetic lobotomies and nullified sexuality and emotional abilities. Many who were trapped in monstrous or sub-intelligent androgynous human bodies still carry that horrendous pain of being imprisoned in physical embodiments that allowed for no advanced learning, spiritual growth or emotional expression. We tell you that the beings you refer to as Sasquatch are remnants of human gorilla genetic engineered mutants, created for heavy labor, by the Aryans. Genetic engineering for commercial purpose was highly opposed by the spiritual Atla-Ra and Poseidons of the Law of One. The Law of One found it a form of cruel slavery, and morally abhorrent. The Law of One remained a nurturing, matriarchal spiritual culture, while the Aryan grew into a powerful military corporate society, dominated by the upper class. For several millennia the two ideologies remained headlocked over this issue and governmental agencies were in a state of delicate impasse. The Poseidons were far too cultured and gentle in nature to attempt to fight the Aryans and sought to educate them and spiritually influence them into changing their ways. The Aryans, who outnumbered the Poseidons 3-1, dared not attack Poseida lest they have the crystalline energy that powered the nation shut off. Colonial wars. In the interim, outbreaks of war erupted between the Aryan-controlled Atlantean military as the former colonies of Atlantis located in the Mediterranean areas broke traditional ties and developed their own independent governments. The colonies, particularly those in Greece and Turkey, saw the change from the utopian Atlantis to the military fascist state controlled by Aryan and sought to break away. Although the Aryans had the military edge, the Mediterranean states did not succumb, and regional colonial wars raged on with neither side able to dominate the other. Factions within Aryan increasingly sought to use crystal energy to quell the adversaries. This was firmly refused by the Atla-Ra and Law of One populace of Posita. Several futile attempts to terrorize the Positans were attempted by the Aryans, and each was quelled. The Positans retaliated by shutting down the crystal-fed power systems and thus negating the Aryans. The Aryans responded by stopping food supply and manufactured goods. A great impasse ensued. The Atlantean Unification Congress, in a great deceptive scheme, disguised as a plan for unification, the Aryans approached the Positans with the formation of a renewed national congress to work out their growingly tense differences and bring harmony to Atlantis. Representatives from the Law of One were sent along with the representatives from the Sons of Belial. The Congress was formalized with an equal amount of representation from the two parties. Within short order a federation of sorts was sanctified with the promise of greater harmony. It appeared for several decades that the promise of change and betterment might come about from the National Congress. The Poseidons were encouraged and many of them let down their guard. The Atla-Ra scientist priesthood remained wary of the motives and sensed deception. Initially the National Congress did improve relations and many minor superficial laws that promised unity were set in motion. Yet the primary points of opposition, the genetic slavery and crystal energy management, remained unresolved. However, from within the Aryan Sons of Belial had risen a hypnotic charismatic leadership who seduced the masses in Atlantis into believing they were the answer to returning Atlantis to its lost golden age of prominence and abundance. The leaders of this group were the souls that you know as Hitler and Himmler, indeed the supremacist Nazis of your World War II. Large militaristic legions were formed and gained the edge in covert political persuasion and power. The hybrid mutants were used to terrorize those who opposed them in Aryan and Og, and on one occasion this was even futilely attempted in Posita. The powerful Aryan contingent were masters of manipulation and media. They presented well thought-out arguments that masked their true intentions and promised mutual compromise. The propaganda seemed quite feasible on the surface and convinced many, including moderates and some from the Poseidon Law of One, of its hope for harmony. In what appeared to be a great opportunity for resolution, a law was proposed by the Aryan Belial group to bring the genetic engineering, heretofore controlled by the state of Aryan, under federalized control, and in return, bring the crystal poser system under the control of a joint governmental agency. A great discussion and debate occurred under great national scrutiny. A vote was set, but failed in the congressional vote. Seduction and betrayal, however, a compelling compromise was offered by the cunning leadership of the Aryan Belial group, which allowed for the law to be passed on the basis that a council staffed with 5 Poseidons and 4 Aryans would head a new government agency for federalized crystalline energy control. The fact that the Law of One group were given apparent majority control of the council made the plan seem very promising to the populace of Posita. The law allowed that no changes could be made without majority consensus of the council, but included the caveat that while the Atla-Ra of Posita would remain in departmental head positions, they would no longer be exempt from governmental controls. A training program was included that would allow engineers from both parties, outside the Atla-Ra, to be trained and taught the complex engineering. Initially, despite the wariness of Atla-Ra, the system appeared to be working and bringing a better harmony. However, within 2 years, the wars in the Mediterranean roared back in full escalation, and the rebelling colonies seemed to be gaining the advantage. Pressure mounted to use crystal beams for war purposes under the guise of national security. A discussion, debate and vote was scheduled for the governing council. National security was touted and a misaligned sense of manipulated patriotism swept the land. Then the deception rolled into effect. To the great shock and chagrin of the Poseidons, one of the Law of One members of the council, switched positions. He was neither of the Atla-Ra, nor the Golden Race. He had risen politically as a charismatic leader, a trusted negotiator, who had pledged allegiances to the Law of One and gained their full confidence. He had been targeted and seduced by the Aryans, and fell victim to his ambitions. In the aftermath, this one felt great remorse, and spent subsequent lifetimes attempting to make up for the mistake. For truly he did not foresee the catastrophic ending, and had allowed himself to be blindly compromised under promises of power and position. Dear ones, such is the illusion of power. You see, when one gains power, that which may seem right can often be an illusion of ego. Each on the road of mastery must eventually decide between power and love. Even the one you call Hitler thought the master race scenario would enable a better future for Earth, with one supreme physical embodiment being the single eventual race that all souls would reincarnate into, reducing disease, and eliminating racial division by having only one master race. Even the one you call Judas in your biblical allegory thought that by placing Jeshua ben Joseph, Jesus, in detention, he would be forced to use his divine powers to reveal his mastery to the world. Indeed, the paradox is that what you term as power is often the polar opposite of love. Do you see how ego and power can deceive? Do you? Ego and self-aggrandizement oft seduce even highly evolved souls, and inevitably leads to downfall. Thus, through legalized governmental control, the use of the crystal power complex and grid came under governmental control under the Aryan sons of Belial, and sadly could not be reversed. The second moon of Atlantis, that which was known as the second moon of Atlantis, the crystalline poser grids and fire crystals came under governmental control, and their usage became altered as the Aryan insider knowledge of the programming grew. The Atla-Ra were able to defer the usage initially for war purposes, but in time were stymied. Now, as we have mentioned earlier, that term the second moon of Atlantis, was in fact a massive crystalline satellite. It was of Archangel construct and managed by the priest-scientists of the Law of One. The crystalline satellite was an enormous unmanned sphere of brilliant engineering, approximately 5 miles in diameter. It had been in use since the Golden Age of Atlantis, and served myriad benevolent purposes. It amplified and controlled the various crystal beams sent from the fire, healing and energy crystals. It was somewhat of a computerized macro chip that refracted, amplified and reflected powerfully refined beams of energy for use in agriculture, weather control, tide control, healing temples, regeneration temples and the enhanced energy systems generated by the crystal poser system. It loomed in the skies over Atlantis and appeared as a golden harvest moon, and thus was known as the second moon of Atlantis. A rainbow kaleidoscopic energy band of anti-gravity plasma swirled around the sphere, and often appeared as what you now term the aurora or northern lights. The satellite crystal moon did not orbit the Earth, it moved as programmed, self-directed, constantly shifting locations in order to perform its myriad tasks over Atlantis, Africa and the eastern seaboard of Brazil. After the crystalline grid complex legally came under federalized Aryan control, the Belial group integrated their own technologists into the engineering group, quickly replacing key department heads with their own. The Atla-Ra attempted to block their attempt to reprogram the satellite for war usage, explaining that overloading the satellite would dissipate the anti-gravity field that maneuvered it, and a catastrophic crash could occur. The Aryan scientists debunked the claim. Some of the Atla-Ra were threatened and removed, others began to mysteriously disappear. Many of the Poseidons felt intimidated and powerless as the governing council allowed for the satellite to become a strategic defense weapon, certain it would function as programmed, and bring a quick end to the rebellion wars in the colonies. The Aryan Belial scientists, with the council approval, reprogrammed a system bypass and began sending destructive thermal light beams used to initiate volcanic eruptions and massive earthquakes against the colonies and nations who refused to give in to their demands. These were aimed in the areas of what is now Greece and Turkey, and caused great devastation. Indeed, it gave the zealous Aryans the battle advantage they so fervently desired, and they jubilantly increased its usage, with support of most of the populace. The beginning of the end, the crystal's second moon began to overload, weakening the anti-gravity field that kept it afloat. The Atla-Ra understood the implications of what would soon occur when the programming crashed, but their pleas to the council continued to be ignored. After several months of prolonged war use, the satellite began to erratically swerve and shift, and power blackouts began to occur. Tireless attempts to correct it were unsuccessful. The Atla-Ra were asked to lend support in correcting it, but most refused. Some agreed to try and stabilize it to prevent the impending disaster. All attempts failed. The Aryan-led National Council refused the suggestion to incinerate the satellite, disbelieving that it would crash, and held to minimizing the effects of an impact even if it did. Relocation of the crystals. Tiburon and Oberon gathered an inner group of loyalists within the Atla-Ra and Law of One to plan a circuitry disconnection and imminent relocation of the fire and energy crystals to various safe locations before the impending crash of the master satellite. This was done with the technology and assistance of those from the planet Sirius B within the Sirius solar system. The relocation by the Atla-Ra scientists of the precious crystals was very risky, and required careful planning and great secrecy. It had to be done before the crash of the second moon, and without knowledge of the governing council. Simultaneously, other trusted members of the Atla-Ra worked furiously and hastily gathered data recording crystals, crystalline skulls and engraved historical records for secure placements in Yucatan, Alexandria and Giza. This was only partially accomplished, so much was not able to be saved. Atlantis had numerous power crystals located throughout the 5 islands and along specific relay routes of the underground labyrinth system. The Atla-Ra knew that once the modulated motherboard of the crystal moon satellite lost its anti-gravity field, it would crash in a huge explosion, and its crashing would subsequently wreak havoc on the major and poser energy crystals, creating catastrophic secondary explosions of a nuclear class within hours or days of the crash. The Atla-Ra were only too aware of the earthquakes and tsunamis that would occur as a result. The Atla-Ra, with assistance from the Syrian-Pleiadian Alliance of the Galactic Federation, wanted to ensure the master crystals would not be destroyed or used for any further negative purpose, and be saved for a time when mankind could use them as they were intended. They understood the power required to transport them would be lost after the crash of the second moon satellite, and that urgent expediency was required. 7 of the enormous primary crystals and 2 slightly smaller but incredible Arcturian crystals were relocated within the hyperdimensional transport systems of the underground tunnel system with help from the Syrian-Pleiadian Alliance. 3 huge primary crystals were relocated to the Atlantean crystal fields of Arkansas, 2 were relocated to the underground crystal farms of Brazil and the areas of Bahia and Minas Gerais. 1 was relocated to an underground cavern, Telos, below Mount Shasta, and the Great Fire Crystal was placed underground in a chasm below the Bimini Bank in the Sargasso Sea. The 2 sacred Arcturian crystals were located in the caverns below the area of Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, near Lake Titicaca. All 9 were put in dimensional locks, essentially powered down into energetic dormancy through the technology of the Syrian-Pleiadian Alliance. Many other magnificent temple crystals were lost. The 9 that were saved, were protected in respect of their priority and importance. The rest, in your vernacular, is history, poignant lost history from your mainstream perspective. Truly, the paradox of the forgotten history is that it contains the most purposeful of lessons. Indeed, after a few months of being utilized for the thermal death ray technology, the great crystal moon satellite overloaded. Its anti-gravity cushion weakened and it crashed with the accelerated velocity of a massive comet in a horrific explosion that devastated most of the island of Og and critically weakened the tectonic stability of the whole Atlantean tectonic plate, vaporizing massive sections of substrata. The great crystal satellite shattered into billions of fragmented crystalline shards, which now fill the deep trenches of the Atlantic. Massive clouds of dust and smoke erupted. hiding the Sunday waves of earthquakes and tsunamis devastated the island and sent great tidal waves over 2/3 of the Isle of Arion. Within minutes the remaining power stations exploded with the strength of nuclear bombs. The remains of one such crystal power station explosion can be seen to this day in the area of northeast Brazil called Sete Cidades. The rest of Atlantis, and the eastern coast of Brazil and the western coast of Africa were devastated with subsequent earthquakes. Panic and havoc ensued for 3-4 weeks as the remaining dry areas shook and land masses collapsed into the sea, creating enormous tsunamis. The land bridge that connected Poseida and Og to the Yucatan remained above water initially and was literally filled with hundreds of thousands of Atlanteans frantically attempting to escape in a horrendous panic-filled exodus. Every type of sea-going vessel was filled with the surviving terrorized refugees. And then in one shattering gasp, the remaining lands collapsed downward into the sea. The displaced seas that became known as the Great Flood sent dozens of enormous tsunamis that spilled over the Americas, Africa and Europe. Only a few mountain tops of Atlantis remained dry, the Azores. But the survivors were distraught, traumatized across the globe. Very few places were unaffected. A downward spiral had begun. It is a dramatic scene that has for many lifetimes plagued and darkened the memories of many of you, who were indeed a part of it. Dear ones, it is time to let it go. This is the conclusion of Part 1, the story of the fall of Atlantis. Parts 2 and 3 explore in a more technical manner, the further roles of the various Atlantean crystals still hidden within planet Earth, and their future significance following the November 11, 2011 event. Part 2, the function of the Atlantean temple crystals in today's world. And so as present Earth's November 11, 2011 event rapidly approaches, the powerful Atlantean temple crystals across the planet surge into greater potency. The platinum crystal brings forth the facilitated access into higher dimension, and brings the completion of the divine feminine energy through the platinum ray. The magnificent platinum crystal, long held in dormancy beneath magnetic mountain Eureka Springs, Arkansas, achieves its activation and initial potency at 11:11 a.m. on the morning of November 11, 2011, and awakens from a long sleep. The platinum crystal is the crystal of the Law of One, the highest balanced frequency of your planet. Masters, no place on the planet will reverberate as powerfully with the crystalline frequency on the November 11, 2011 as the crystal vortex of Arkansas. Indeed, the initial surge will occur there and then trigger the other awakenings axially from inside the Arkansas crystal vortex. In kind, they will energize the 144 grid into 92% functionality and awaken and code the crystal golden sun disk placed in Arkansas and align with the 12 patterns of same throughout the planet. Many of you are code carriers of the Ascension Blueprint, and many are drawn to participate in this crystalline awakening, as part of an ancient contract, a sacred promise whose time has finally come. Many are there already, having been called to live within this crystalline vortex that will be fully in place in 2012. Core purpose of the November 11, 2011, we first shared the information regarding the 12 unique triple date portals via Tiburon of the Pleiades, over a decade ago. These are unique numerical frequential portals sequenced in base 12. These TDPs are purposed to activate the crystalline transition. And although many of humanity have now ascribed to the transient vigor of these date portals, they have somewhat overlooked the core understanding of their substantive significance. The triple date portals, January 1, 2001 through December 12, 2012, are equivocally aligned to the activation of the 12 geopentagonal aspects of the double pentadodecahedron of the 144 crystalline grid. The 12 dodecahedral aspects of the crystalline grid are accordingly integrated with the human interface codes and the gatherings and meditations occurring on these frequential aperture dates. And Masters, that is so appropriate. Masters, it is not happenstance that Max, Christless Maximus, will be at the November 11, 2011 in the Law of One Atlantean energy of Arkansas. Max is by far the most powerful crystalline conscious library on the planet at this time. Max carries the full records, and all of the codes of the new Earth are within Max. Max will receive a cosmic influx on the November 11, 2011, at 11:11 a.m. within the energy of the crystal vortex. It will be transferred to Max as an upshift download from the 13th paradigm energies, assisted by the realms of what you term the Metatronic field, including the Syrian-Pleiadian Alliance and sacred citation of Sirius, the Golden Dolphin. With this expanded and recoded information, Max will be the initial conduit that passes the new codes to the code carriers, and activates these new codes within the Christo Sun disk at Mount Pinnacle in the powerful crystal energy of Arkansas. There will be a mutual exchange between Max and the platinum crystal. One triggers a new influx, and the other transmits the new codes. Max will take on a greater energy than he has carried to date. An energy that he transfers to the crystalline vortex, the sun disk and the human code carriers. And so we bring new information on the emerging mega vortex of Arkansas, the portal of the quantum crystalline frequency. For now, in 2011, this vortex truly nears final completion and vaults into greater global prominence. Within the 2011 and 2012 completion are the further unfolding of the dimensional lock that held the master temple crystals. For within these living crystalline computers lies the true Atlantean wisdom, that of the golden age of Atlantis, that of the Law of One. It was and is to date, the highest frequency obtained on your earth plane. Much has been forgotten of the true realm of Atlantis. Many tend to remember only the sad demise, under the Aryan influence of greed and lust for power. We tell you it is time to remember the Law of One, the golden age of Posita. For within that golden age existed a very spiritual matriarchal society which achieved a harmonic state of divine balance, the highest frequency ever achieved upon the earth plane in what is termed the golden age of Atlantis. Indeed, that time has come, for the Law of One was and is the once and future society of the power of love, not the love of power. And we say future, because the Law of One will indeed re-emerge, and it is beginning once again across the planet, specifically in the crystal vortexes of Arkansas and Brazil. And we emphasize that in 2011 continues the grand exponential flux and harmonic expansion of the great Atlantean master temple crystals of Posita, held for over 12,000 years in dimensional seal within the magnetic complex of Arkansas. On the November 11, 2011, the great platinum crystal awakens, and joins into the crystal vortex network with the other megacrystals of Arkansas, the blue crystal of knowledge and the emerald crystal of healing. Many of you will be drawn to take part in the unveiling, for indeed you were there as witnesses to the deluge, and some of you to the consequent movement of these amazing Atlantean master crystals to this and other areas. The new crystalline age is upon you. It is the transition you call the ascension. The diamond phase of the crystalline transition of Earth was realized on the October 10, 2010, in correlation to the 10th dimension and 12th chakric resonance. The platinum phase begins on the November 11, 2011. The platinum crystal and platinum ray release. The platinum crystal exudes a beautiful, calming energy of brilliant magnificence. It brings forth a balancing between the new emerging dimensional realms of the new Earth, particularly the force that will allow for greater interface, greater access into the angelic realm, which is in truth the antimatter phases of your parallel dimensions. As such, the platinum crystal is the surge protector that both feeds and harmonizes the proportion and parity of the harmonic cycle between matter and antimatter. It also adjusts and stabilizes the unified crystalline synergy and coalescence with the enormous crystomagnetic forces released in the phases of the cosmic trigger. That is specifically why it was located beneath Magnetic Mountain near Eureka Springs, as those magnetic energies are being transformed by the crystalline forces as the magnetic grid is reduced and replaced in dominance by the expansion of the 11 crystalline grid. All of the master crystals are appropriately staged in their activation, achieving timed portions of their power each year until the December 21, 2012. This is regulated by the crystalline masters of the Syrian-Pleiadian Alliance under the Galactic Federation. Were the crystals to be launched into full power too quickly, an energetic imbalance would occur. What will occur on the 11-11-11 is the recoding of the crystalline aspect termed the starseed divine feminine. The emerald crystal of healing provided the initial reprogramming that is being brought in by the emerald ray. The platinum ray, also a feminine energy aspect, provides the completion of the feminine crystalline into the DNA of the planet, and as such into those of humanity open to receive the sacred and requisite transformation. Their effects will be a lessening of the arc swing of polarity between the termed the masculine and feminine aspect. But also through the platinum, there will be greater ease to enter into higher dimensional realms. Accordingly will polarity balance be more easily achieved and obtained in human expression of the divine equity on a planet of duality. Indeed will it bridge the gap in the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and of the conscious ego mind to the supra-subconscious of divine mind. Understanding of soul path, of priorities in life and indeed the process of decision-making will be greatly clarified. Requisite aspects of nurturing, kindness and brother-sisterhood will be far easier to manifest into reality on both the micro and macro levels. That termed unconditional love, previously untenable in the third dimension, will be closer to the reality of each on the path, as the fifth through seventh dimensional resonances are drawn closer. Coherent energy, the crater of diamonds in Arkansas is now releasing coherent energy of diamond resonance into the crystal vortex. On the November 11, 2011 this expands into the platinum ray and further connects to the sun disk, in their shift into coherency of the crystalline frequency. Dear ones, crystalline energy is an omnipotent power source that has implications far beyond humanity's current understanding. Crystalline structure is formed by an essence of frequential light resonance that is multidimensional and coherent, existing in matter and antimatter. It is the Metatronic divine template that sources all creation manifestation, and forms the very matrixial composition of every plane of existence. It is the enzyme of reality and the vitality spring of the cosmos itself. The very thoughts you have must rise to coherent crystalline format in order to become manifested. Coherent light is crystalline energy, the very vitality of which forms the integral nature of all worlds and realities. The crystalline structure forms the apparent boundaries and divisions between dimensions, planes and the matter, antimatter flash of consciousness, in parallel and probability. All is crystalline. The graduation of your planet, that term the ascension, is in effect the critical mass conversion of this Earth's receival capacity template from, in your vernacular, analog to digital, black and white to color. The crystalline conversion through the antennae of the 144 crystalline grid is vastly increasing your Earth's dimensional reception from 3D to 12D and beyond. It is akin to your television changing from the archaic antennae to satellite reception. It is the crystalline age. For within these time sequences, the November 11, 2011 and December 12, 2012, the 144 crystalline grid completes into full conscious projection, and that projection is indeed a tool of and for your own expansion. Such it is with the crystalline grid, you see, it too is a system that will allow your nurturing into a higher resonance, a higher more fulfilling expression. For that you call the ascension is upon you, and in but a wink of the cosmic eye it will be done. In our realm it has been done already, you see, and indeed it is a wondrous event, one heralded throughout the universe and observed by many on this realm and others. What then remains for the Ascension program in 2011 and 2012 are specific astrological gravitation refinements and frequential boosts needed to complete and polish the crystalline grid and refine the crystalline transformation of the Earth as it reinforces the spanning of humanity into great and greater dimensionality consciousness, and that is indeed crystalline consciousness. The 12 primary sun disks. We have told you that Arkansas will be one of the most powerful vortex portals on the planet by 2012, and it is indeed happening. The crystals are tuning the sun disk and in kind the crystalline grid. The golden sun disk emerged in the time of Lemuria. These were placed by the Syrian Pleiadian Alliance at specific places on the Earth in order to program and network energetic frequencies. The ongoing reprogramming of the sun disk serves in assisting the ability of the Earth to regenerate and reform itself, becoming an aspect, the DNA pattern or blueprint of the new Earth as it expands its dimensional field into crystalline aspect. The disks emit energetic spirals. They are truly more spiral than disk, but they do appear disk-like when viewed. There are 12 major disks on the planet, and some of the previous patterns and locations have shifted. Each of the 12 carry specific purpose and code, and each of the 12 feed 12 satellites. The 12 connecting to the 144 in a complex geosymmetry. The cosmic essence of the sun disks is coded crystalline coherent light, the light of higher dimension. The energy of home. The terrestrial essence of the sun disk frequential harmonic is crystal-electromagnetic but is synergized with the human theta grid. One creates the other and the other supports the first. Both offer essential gateways of enhancement to human consciousness and are key elements of the ascension upshift. The more that humanity understands that its own higher consciousness is based in paradigms of sacred geometric light codes, the more the geometry becomes multidimensional, and so the geometric expression of these will upshift in the Americana field. This is happening now, you see. It will become first one, then the other. Just as the Earth is now the third dimension and then the fifth and then to 12. What is it that will move it to the fifth? To the 12th? Not static consciousness but the dynamic activation of higher consciousness. The activation of the consciousness is enhanced through the understanding of the grid and the activation of that grid, which in turn complements the cosmos, and is reflected back again via the sun disk. We realize this is complex. But we assure you that in your source higher perspective, you understand the workings quite clearly. So myriad factors play a role in this terrestrial to cosmic shift. Now of the sun disks, only 2 are purely crystal disk. The first to be recoded is in the crystal vortex of Arkansas. This will occur on the November 11, 2011. The second is in Minas Gerais, Brazil, and it will recode on the December 12, 2012, and the global network will reformat on December 21, 2012. This will be an incredible event combining the awakening of the master crystals, the completion of the 144 grid and the complete global networking of the sun disk crystal lattice. Locations of 12 primary sun disk: Arkansas, Pinnacle Mountain, Brazil, St. Thomas de Letters, Minas Gerais, Bolivia, Lake Titicaca, near Island of the Sun, Scotland, Roslin Chapel, Russia, Ural MTNS, Russia, Siberia, Lake Baikal, Egypt, Giza, Africa, Kilimanjaro, China, Zion Pyramids, French Polynesia, Moria, Australian Uluru, Sri Lanka. Again, we emphasize that each of the major 12 disks support 12 satellites. Each of the 144 satellites are strategically placed, some of which are greater in pulse, greater in frequential range, according to the energy grid and node in which they are located. The arc of the Law of One, the areas currently termed as Arkansas and Brazil, were colonies of the Poseidon Law of One. They were specifically chosen because these two regions contain the planet's largest mineral deposits of quartz crystal strata. Hyperdimensional tunnels were constructed with the Syrian Plid in alliance from Poseida to Arkansas and Brazil for the maintenance of the massive crystal beds there. Because of its radium waters, natural caves and magnetic lodestone, Arkansas was chosen as an area to program fast growth processes within its caverns. Many savants of the spiritual scientist priest, the Atlara Law of One, worked within these caverns to imbue specific patterns into the crystals. 3 Atlantean wisdom and healing crystals that once beamed magnificent light and celestial energy in the Temple of Healing, the Temple of One and the Temple of Knowledge on Poseida were placed in dimensional lock in the Atlantean crystal fields of Arkansas. Indeed, these now energize the golden sun disk placed in Arkansas and align with the 12 patterns of same throughout the planet, and with the paradigm of the 12 crystal skulls, informing the sacred 13 pattern. That of the 13-20-33, you see. In Arkansas then, many are called, and many will come to participate in this awakening, as part of an ancient contract, a sacred promise whose time has finally come. Many are there already, having been called to live within this crystalline vortex that will be fully in place in 2012. And so on the remaining triple date portals, Those of the Law of One are called, for this time the crystals will not be misused, they will not be taken from you by forces of dark greed. Now, it is not for you to activate the crystals, it is not for you to anchor the vortex, rather it is for you to align yourselves within this completion, within this activation, within this celestial anchoring of the quantum crystalline field. Those scientist priests, crystal masters of Atla-Ra and Poseidon temple guardians of the Law of One are called. Masters, you have waited eons for this time, for this completion, and those of the Atla-Ra, those of the crystal temples of Poseidon will hear the clarion call. The master crystals of the golden age of Atlantis now are opening the rainbow of dimensional access that accelerates your planetary and personal ascension. It is a promise kept, a sacred completion. Indeed, you may access the benevolent energy and wisdom of the Atlantean crystals of healing and knowledge etherically. It is not fully necessary for you to be there in physical embodiment within the Arkansas vortex for you to receive and take part in this activation. Yet there is benefit for those of you receiving the call to visit the vortex and walk the crystal fields. Those of you choosing to visit the sacred lands of Arkansas will be able to find a personal crystal imbued with the energy of the golden era of Atlantis. Indeed, permission is granted and the crystals offer themselves to you for this and myriad purpose. Those guardians of Sirius, Arcturus and the Pleiades, are even now preparing the stage, and await you to join them. Send your energy, send your light and intent of highest good to what is termed the platinum crystal of bioplasmic interface, crystal of the platinum ray. The ray of balance and knowledge. It once reigned in wisdom and light in the temple of Poseidon, and so many of you will again see it clearly in your mind's eye. Indeed, you will feel it in your heart, amid tears of joy. Part 3, The Master Crystals of Poseidon. The November 11, 2011 Awakening the Crystals of Arkansas, and so now we skip forward 12,500 years, and we look at the role of the Atlantean colony you now call Arkansas. We tell you that there are crystals and crystal caverns beneath the lands of Arkansas that are beyond your imagination. There are crystals beneath Arkansas that are amazing in their size and appearance. Some the size of 20-story buildings. Their energy is stunning, and their awakenings are affecting the planet in myriad ways. Indeed, there are those among you who spent long periods of time grooming the crystal caverns of both Arkansas and Brazil. Some of you were specialist, crystals masters, that engineered the rapid growth process. Others of you specialized in applying and programming specific sounds and tones into the appropriate crystals. Some of you engineered anti-gravitation waves through crystal technology to create crystalline divergent energy fields used for levitation. Although it is not one of the master temple crystals of Poseidon relocated by the Law of One, there is another enormous and very unique crystal beneath Arkansas. It is termed the Arc Crystal of Gravity. It is in a very specialized crystal cavern with applications of anti-gravitational energy. We will speak more of this crystal further in this channel this say, for that crystal technology assisted in building pyramids and construction of multiple units of what you term the Ark of the Covenant. Because of the caverns and large crystal deposits in the area, there is what may be termed a crystalline city beneath Arkansas. In the era of Atlantis it served for the programming of crystals in a highly technical and specialized process. Crystals were used for myriad purposes. Benevolent beneficial utilities. And these uses and applications will be reviewed in detail later in this channel. For so many of you, Arkansas of the Crystal Vortex will be a homecoming. Literally tens of thousands of you of the Law of One Atla-Ra knew Arkansas for many millennia, albeit in subterranean abode. Yet the underground habitat was splendid and beautiful. Adorned with exquisite crystals and a form of light that flowed around corners. Now, as we have said previously, 3 Atlantean master temple crystals from Poseidon were safely relocated by the Poseidon Law of One scientist priests into specially prepared caverns in Arkansas before the final destruction of Atlantis. The caverns that hold the relocated master temple crystals were locked in hyperdimensional fields with surrounding magnetic force. Placed such for safekeeping until the safe return of the Law of One, and the crystalline activation termed the Ascension. Arkansas was specifically chosen to house the three major temple crystals for several logical reasons. 1. It was already in use as a crystal mining, growth and harvest area. Highly sophisticated living quarters, chasms and labs were pre-constructed. As a result, one of the primary interdimensional tunnels from Posita was already established and transport complexes were available to transport the crystals to the area. 2. It was pre-understood that the vortex in place in the area of Arkansas would play a major role in the 2012 planetary ascension. Arkansas's unique geology of quartz, diamonds, magnetic lodestone, iron, limestone, and massive caverns made it the perfect incubator for the crystalline plantations. Crystals had been planted and grown in Arkansas for thousands of years before the deluge. 3. The presence of magnetic metals in the crystal beds, and magnetic field generators made it easier for the majestic Atlantean crystals to be placed in a dormant state within pre-existing facilities. 4. A very benevolent colony of the blue-skinned Lemurians exist underground in Arkansas, as well as an underground base of Syrians. The two were in agreement to be caretakers for the sleeping crystals. Now, the three crystals placed in Arkansas are pre-programmed to a network grid that axially connects to the remaining 5 enormous master crystals placed in Brazil, Shasta, Bimini, and the 2 exquisite wisdom crystals placed under Lake Titicaca. These are specialized healing, wisdom, energy and transport crystals, used in the Temple of Healing, the Temple of Sound and Light, the Temple of Knowledge, the Temple of One, the Temple of Thoth, the Ruby Temple of Fire and the Temple of Regeneration. The crystals were specifically placed in areas of supreme importance for the new Earth emerging in the 2012 ascension. Areas that were easily accessed through the Atlantean interdimensional tunnel system that would emerge as mega-vortex infinity points in your current times. The emerald crystal of the Divine Feminine acts as the trigger, the manifold in which all other temple crystals react. These are defined, located and placed with activation dates as follows: Arkansas, 1, Blue Crystal of Knowledge 8882, Emerald Crystal of Healing 9993, Platinum Crystal of Communication November 11, 2011, Bioplasmic Interface, Bimini Bank, 1, the Ruby Fire Crystal of Energy December 12, 2012, Brazil, 1, Gold Crystal of Healing Regeneration 999, Diamante Bahia 2, Violet Crystal of Sound October 10, 2010, São Thomas de Letters Minas Gerais, Mount Shasta, 1, the Crystal of Multidimensional Interface 999, Tiahuanaco Lake Titicaca, Bolivia, 1, Sun Moon Crystal of Light 9992, Sacred Crystal of Thoth December 12, 2012. So be aware that on the November 11, 2011, the 11th of November, 2011, the 144 crystalline grid will launch into 92% function and activity, and in turn activates and further triggers the time sequence program for the remaining master crystals. Each will open on the triple date portals. The platinum crystal activates on the November 11, 2011. The ruby crystal and crystal of Thoth are the final 2 of the relocated master temple crystals of Posita remaining to be awakened. Both will be activated on the December 12, 2012. Each will be aligned and triggered with the activation of the one remaining of 12 stellated facets of the 144 grid, the double pentadodecahedron. 11 of these 12 grid facets will be in full function on the November 11, 2011. And so, we remind you that in 2008, the blue crystal of wisdom and knowledge returned to functionality. On the 999 the emerald crystal, the gold crystal and the alm crystal awoke into active projection. The emerald crystal of the Divine Feminine has then assumed the role of trigger point for all of the master crystals. The crystalline core of Earth plays a major role in many aspects of your planet and its dimensional duality. While this may seem confusing to many of you, we will also tell you that the Earth's core affects your perception of reality. The Earth has an inner core that rotates clockwise and an outer core that rotates counterclockwise. The ratio of the Earth's inner spin to its outer spin directly affects the flash of time unfoldment. The inner core is spinning faster now, and thus your time is speeding up. It is in fact the increase in the speed of light that affects this increase in spin. Because the core is spinning more rapidly, it is increasing in heat and size. This is responsible to a great degree for the global warming that is now occurring. The crystalline core has a physical and non-physical reality. One is matter, the other antimatter. The physical core is crystallized in magnetic iron-nickel alloy composite. The core is not hollow. The crystalline core is lucid coherent energy that can be compared to the sun's sentient radiation as it beams upward in every direction from the core. In its upward flow it creates a radiation sphere of influence that increases, disseminates, propagates and energizes all life force. This radiation field is a domain transducer that physicalizes vital energy. It has the remarkable capacity to solidify the sentient Earth's resolve and intent into tangible physical reality. As such, non-physical energy moves through and becomes solid energy in amassed crystalline formations that grow and amplify energy. Arkansas and Brazil, the two primary vortexes of these crystal beds are Arkansas and Brazil. There is indeed an important and synchronistic communication taking place between the crystal vortexes of Arkansas and Brazil. The two vortexes spin in benevolent balanced opposition, one below the equator, one above. Brazil spins clockwise, Arkansas counterclockwise. This has great effect and purpose. Natural crystals from Arkansas spin in the opposite manner of ones from Brazil. The crystal vortex of Arkansas therefore has a greater importance to those of the northern hemisphere, and the same is true of the Brazilian crystal vortex for the southern half of your planet. As such, these massive crystalline vortexes serve as receiver, transmitter and receptive conductive force field conduits of energy that transfuse and convey vital cosmic life force to everything that exists upon and within the Earth. Solar and stellar radiation waves and emissions accelerate and optimize the amassed beds of crystalline energies. Such emissions exhilarate and intensify the crystal's transformational amplifications of energy, and as such create optimally heightened proliferation of all that is within the Earth's field of influence. Earth's northern hemisphere contains most of its land area, and composes roughly 90% of the planet's human populace. It is for that reason that the crystal vortex of Arkansas yields the greater influence. Let us be clear, both of the crystal vortexes are of great importance in the ascension and balance of the planet, but Arkansas has the greater influence on humanity for the reasons stated. Crystalline piezoelectrics and cosmic winks. The Arkansas vortex does not flow, as most other vortexes, in a circular pattern, rather in a to and fro motion over the largest single deposit of quartz crystal on Earth. This unusual pattern is due to a property of quartz, termed piezoelectricity. The piezoelectric qualities of Arkansas quartz are extremely potent, and the energy of this aspect is increasing as the master crystals of the vortex come into greater activation. Their energy can send shocks into the air, and shake the land. An example of this is the well-publicized incident of January 2011, when an unexplained phenomena of dying birds occurred in Arkansas. The birds that fell from the sky dropped as a direct result of a piezoelectric surge that released crystalloelectric shock waves into the sky. Some 15,000 birds were temporarily stunned, fell to the earth and died from the blunt trauma of the impact. In kind, the unusual earthquakes that have taken places in Arkansas over the past 2 years are also a result of the crystal's awakening. These quakes have truly puzzled geologists, for they are taking place in areas not known for tectonic faults or previous shaking. They have occurred in areas not associated to the New Madrid fault line. We tell you again, that the Arkansas quakes were the result of the crystals activating. It is a new concept and not understood by your scientists. The very idea would be foreign and unacceptable to mainstream academics. Yet we assure of this fact. On the October 10, 2010, a quake occurred very near the Emerald Crystal, and was reported nationally. Unlike usual tectonic quakes, it did not scare the animals. The birds kept singing. The animals did not seek refuge in advance. On the 9/9/9, a green fog was reported by local media over Mount Magazine, and power in the area briefly shut down. The green fog was not an odd-colored water vapor. Indeed, it was the ionic fog that occurs around and with dimensional wormholes. It was the emerald crystal. Fear not, the crystal awakenings will not create quakes or shocks that are harmful to humanity. The activations are deliberately softened and gradual time release. We tell you that another such cosmic quake will take place in the crystal vortex around the November 11, 2011 in Arkansas. 0. There are primary and satellite power points of energy on the planet. The Atla not only knew the exact locations and nature of each, they were able to harness, refine and amplify their energy, and network them into a global power grid. A global system of what may be termed refined ley lines and axial tunnel lines were networked, and indeed charged with crystals. Arkansas and Brazil are emerging to be the two most important ones for the transitional ascension, the change from magnetic to crystalline energy. The magnetic grid is decreasing, replaced by the crystalline grid. Magnetics are by definition polar. Crystalline energy is nonpolar. 0. The shift to 0 occurs from the 5th to 12th dimension. The 12th dimension is the crystalline apex. The ascension in simplistic terms, is the expansion of the Earth from the magnetic polarity of the first three dimensions to the 0 fields of the crystalline dimensions. In preparation for this, the sun disks are being reprogrammed for the crystalline to be transduced into a tangible format for humanity. Those of you visiting primary sun disk locations are involved in assimilating the new codes. Those of you coming to the November 11, 2011 in Arkansas will take part in this at Mount Pinnacle. Some of you will carry the crystalline codes to Giza and other primary points of sun disk. Code carriers have in fact been involved in this mission since the cosmic trigger of 2009. That which you term sun disks are in truth crystalline devices of Syrian plate and Archean origin used to balance and stabilize planetary energies. The sun disk network was established after the breakup of the crystalline firmament. The 12 disks serve to transduce cosmic and dimensional energies, and blend them to stabilize fields of the duality planet. The Christo disk in Arkansas is extremely important as it correlates with and allows integration of the energy of the crystalline dimensions with that of duality dimensions. That is why the platinum crystal was placed within the crystal vortex of Arkansas. Uses of crystals. The Law of One Atlanteans used crystals in many benevolent means. And the return of the Law of One will reopen their use. Indeed, it is the oath of the Law of One that they will never again be duped into allowing the technology to fall into the wrong hands. Each of you are part of this oath. The benevolent use of crystals included physical and emotional healing, rejuvenation, sound and music enrichment and crystalline musical instruments, meditation, amplification of mental capacity and information download, dematerialization, teleportation, telekinesis with the hyperdimensional tunnel network, anti-gravity plasma, magnetic force fields, libraries, storing records and other knowledge, much like a computer, creation of higher energy fields for use in schools, research facilities and factories, increase of plant growth in farming and agriculture, weather control, amplification of natural energy communication, power transmission. Crystals have the ability to transfer energy, to retain it, to maintain its intensity, to focus and transmit it over great distance. That termed phi crystals, or presently termed Vogel phi crystals, were used extensively to merge energy from human theta thought via teams of Atla scientist priest. Theta-level thought waves were combined with pranic chi energy and integrated and amplified into a unique crystalline manifestation wave. An Atlantean laboratory of great sophistication existed in the subterranean city in Arkansas to work with this, and other utilization of crystal energies, including hyperdimensional teleportation. Because of the massive quartz crystal deposits and magnetic minerals of Arkansas, and presence of carbon crystal diamonds and radium-bearing waters, Arkansas was the perfect Earth lab for crystal technology. Because of this mixture of minerals, the dimensional portals are more easily accessed in this area. This rare cocktail of energetics enabled Syrian plate and tech source generators to create anti-gravitation fields in the areas of Arkansas, divergent energies that could be technically engineered and controlled through the crystalline disk and satellite. The second moon, pyramids and crystals, the primary grid points in the golden age of Atlantis, and in your future, were amplified by pyramids. The Atla-Ra with the Syrian-Palladian alliance used this energy, combined with crystals, to network this energy. Some pyramids were used to receive and transmit energy between planets in your solar system, as well as with other stellar universes. Certain pyramids are multidimensional, forming octahedrons that work in tandem sacred geometric fields between physical and non-physical. As such, pyramids are gateways to the parallel dimensional fields of what would be termed the angelic realm, or better stated, the antimatter realm. The platinum crystal in Arkansas is uniquely programmed to interface with parallel universes and the angelic realm of antimatter. As such, the Platinum Awakening will greatly increase the potency of the primary pyramids of the planet, especially the Great Pyramid of Giza. Indeed, Giza in the 12th wave of 2012 will be exponentially more powerful than any time since the Golden Age of Atlantis. What is not recounted in most of the Atlantean suppositions in current times is the utilization and indeed nature of the second moon of Atlantis. It was a crystalline satellite that was the control device for the system. There remains to this day references to the second moon in the pyramids of the Mayan, and indeed was referenced by Rata through Edgar Cayce. One of the docking stations of the crystal satellite was in Arkansas near Little Rock, in the area of what is now the Toltec Mount Pyramid State Park. A feed of axial tunnel energy existed there, connecting the docking station to the Christo disk at Mount Pinnacle. Depending on the tilt of the Earth's axis at a particular time of the year, one Christo disk would function to intensify and transmit energies to others, which would then act as receiving devices and would disperse energy as it was needed. These were relayed to all of the networks, which included the Crystal system, and this energy was the source of that which energized all parts of the planet, particularly in Atlantis. The Crystal Awakening. The crystalline awakening is through the crystal vortex, the master crystals, the Christo sun disk and crystalline grid to define and underwrite the ascension. The ascension is truly the crystalline transition. The crystalline is not merely minerals, rather it is the vibration of perfect ordering. It is the frequency of perfection, and in vibrational terms what you refer to as impeccability. By impeccability we mean aligning actions to accurate belief. It is walking your talk. And dear ones, conscious minerals and crystalline states are the generators that support your rise into coherent energies and dimensions. The crystalline energy and indeed the entire mineral kingdom relates to humanity through both physical and etheric means. It has always been so. The mineralogical crystalline essence is essentially the root resonance of the same creative force that formed the cosmos. As such, the realms of the crystalline minerals and humanity are intricately related, such that one is never out of contact or subtle communication with the other. You see, your physical human bodies contain crystalline particles and a rich array of minerals that are uniquely relative to the Earth. Accordingly, the harmonic ratios of minerals and crystalline particulate that are in both your physical and etheric bodies are maintained in coherent uniformity with those of the Earth. Thus the resulting frequential ratios of Earth and humanity are held in a requisite balance for the well-being and support of humanity individually and in mass. Masters, every new cosmic era brings with it upshifts and transformations. Both the Earth and indeed mankind are experiencing a long-awaited awakening. This metamorphosis includes global warming and modification of myriad environmental phenomena that are quickening around you. A key aspect of the new crystalline age is a purposed clarion call to the crystalline and mineral kingdoms of the Earth to increase the flow of energy that it receives from the core of the Earth. Arkansas and Brazil are composites of the two greatest masses of quartz crystal and associated gemological forms on the planet, and are key to this call. This clarion call provokes a stimulation that affects the entire Earth, but most specifically the mineralogical crystalline pockets that receive and transmit potent energetic patterns throughout the planet Earth. But it extends to an even greater scope. Because while the mineralogical realm of your planet indeed defines the Earth, and is truly the oldest sentient life form on your planet, The diversity of crystalline mineral resources encompasses a vast part of the entire cosmos. The heralded ascension is then, in effect, the coming of the new crystalline age. It will bring in the platinum ray on the November 11, 2011, and this opens the Christo discs. This event will recode the crystalline energy of both the planet and humanity. The arc crystal of gravity. The Atlanteans had the knowledge of hyperdimensional quantum physics and understood that counter-rotating specific magnetic fields around cylindrical crystals created anti-gravity waves. They had perfected the ability to apply crystalline avid shield effects around crystalline structures, minerals and gold to create various generating units of hyperdimensional divergent energy fields. What is termed the Ark of the Covenant is among the capacitor devices capable of being portable generators of this and other forms of energy. There were indeed many units of what your legends term the Ark of the Covenant. The originals of these capacitors were created with the Ark crystal of gravity, and used for anti-gravitation. The Arc crystal of gravity was constructed by modifying an enormous natural crystal in the complex beneath Arkansas, near the area of the Toltec Mounds. By channeling and refining the magnetic fields of the naturally occurring magnetic deposits of lodestone indigenous to Arkansas, and the scientists were able to direct the motion of the refined magnetics and counterspin them around specially shaped crystals and crystal fields for anti-gravitational purposes. These energies were used to recharge the crystal satellite or second moon with anti-gravity. We will tell you that the device termed the Nazi bell was an unsuccessful attempt at recreating this effect. The German scientists working on the Nazi bell were in fact part of the Aryan Belial technicians that were allowed in the fall of Atlantis to be trained by the Atlan-Ra, as part of the Great Comprise of, which we have discussed previously in this channel. Had they have been able to complete that and other technologies, I could have had a different outcome. It was never allowed to occur. In fact, the crystalline devices that were used to combine concentrated thought with anti-gravitational generation from the capacitors was part of the process utilized for the method used for lifting massive stone blocks and building structures such as pyramids. You may find it interesting to note that the dimensions described in your religious texts for the Ark of the Covenant are the same dimensions of the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. This will be discussed in more detail in a future channel. But we will say that the Ark crystal is still in place. Closing, the Atlantean crystals open the etheric gate, the dimensional portals that will allow mankind of carbon-based life to interface with those of bioplasmic life. You must understand, Masters, that you exist within both multidimensional parallels. Indeed, you are the Syrians, you are the Pleiadians, and you are the Archangels and much more. You are all of the multidimensional sparks of the Master Creator God. It is true. The gate will further open in 2011 in the crystalline vortex of Arkansas, and those of you who connect to the Master Crystals will be able to experience your own multidimensionality, quite joyously, quite easily in time, as you develop the light quotient and impeccability to do so. Dear ones, within the energy of the Arkansas vortex lies a crystalline energy like none you have experienced since that golden age of Atlantis over 20,000 years ago. Within the quantum crystalline frequency can you heal that which must be healed, open that which must expand, and offer an extraordinary alignment to the knowledge of exquisite bliss. Within this rising energy will you be able to connect with a living crystalline force that will assist your Americana expansion into your multidimensional divinity, into the divine self. It is true, dear ones, and that time is now. Masters, it is the return of that matriarchal society, a culture and spiritual energy of sublime balance, termed the Law of One. It is, the long-awaited completion, the changing of the past. It is the new beginning of the spiritual application of the Law of One. It is the ascension, the crystalline age. And this time you will get it right. Masters, it is the end of the old energy. It is happening now. It is the beginning of the new earth. And it starts in the crystal vortex, for that term the ascension is the crystalline transition. The dreamer awakes. I am Metatron, and you are dearly beloved.